Robert Hughes is here. He was chief art critic for Time magazine until 2001. His books include American Visions, The Fatal Shore, and The Culture of Complaint. His new book is Goya. It examines the life and work of the Spanish artist. I am pleased to have Robert Hughes back at this table now or whenever he would like to come. Welcome.
God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you, my friend. I'm not sure when you first told me you wanted to write this book.
Years ago.
Yeah.
I'd had it on my mind for a long time. I mean, Goya is, without question, one of the heroes of my life. I don't have sporting heroes, but I do have Goya. No. He just totally fascinated me, but I was never able to really find a way into him, because there isn't any diaries, there aren't any diaries, the letters exist, but they're fairly sparse. And yet, nevertheless, there was this feeling, which I felt very strongly, that he had a kind of, not exactly charismatic, but extremely strong character, which enabled him to negotiate all the things that were thrown in his way, principally, of course, his deafness, which, we think of...
Came at what age?
46 or thereabouts. Yeah. And he was just stricken down, crushed under it like a bug under a harrow, suddenly he couldn't hear the rest of the world. Now, we think sometimes that deafness is a bit comic. Hello, hello, Charlie? Not at all, no. It's more like that frightful utterance of one of Blake's mythic heroes where he says, lost are my emanations, meaning any form of self-expression. You're cut off. That's what happened to Goya, and to see him fighting his way through it to a new subject matter, to a subject matter which hadn't existed in painting really before, and which becomes an essential link to the modernity that was coming. Yeah, that was something.
That may be the answering part to the next question that I want to ask you is, what is his significance and why is he important? Because you once said, as an art critic, if you don't understand or approach Goya, then you are illiterate.
Yeah, I think that's true. In the same way, if you're a literary critic and you can't deal or won't deal with Dickens, or a music critic who won't deal with Beethoven, you're also illiterate. I mean, his genius is actually of that order. And he's a wonderful example of how very high art can, at the same time, be intensely democratic, how it can appeal to the, to the deepest and widest levels of the human psyche, and do it in a way which cuts across all barriers of class, all of that sort of thing. He is marvellous at doing that. He has a kind of almost sleepwalking capacity to go through the normal barriers of communication.
His time was what?
His time was, well, he lived to an enormous age by the standards of the time. I mean, he was born in 1746 and he died in 1828. He was, therefore...
It's a great period of time to live.
It was a great period of time to live. See, the average life of a farm worker was 37 at that time, and people died for of diseases which just wouldn't even put you in hospital today. Right. And so to live to 82, still relatively hale and hearty, was something of an achievement. I mean, it was like a triumph over death contained in one man. And I mean, he wasn't the only man of his time to live so long, but it was not common. And and there he was, working right up to the end. In fact, one of the last things that he did was a little chalk drawing of this old character with a beard stumping along on two sticks, and at the top there's inscribed in chalk the words, "Aún aprendo," I'm still learning. And he was insatiable, he was indefatigable, he was a wonderful guy.
You said he was a modern artist.
He was. He was, because he brings forward that, not only that intense subjectivity, but also that feeling that you're truly up against the irrational that is so characteristic of modern art. I mean, he wasn't going to conceal anything, he was just going to make experience with all its contradictions clear. And he had a to me, amazing capacity to go into that in an almost sacrificial way.
Yet at the same time, he's the last old master, you say.
He's the last old master. He's a wonderful portraitist.
Yeah.
He's a great portraitist of power and nobility. He was, after all, he did the best royal portraits ever. And you've got to remember that although there are a lot of people who think that, you know, I mean, here are these potato-faced Bourbons, you know, who haven't got any claim to any particular physical distinction or beauty. And people think that by painting them as they were, or as they looked, Goya was engaged in acts of satire against rubbish. I mean, he probably made them look better than they were, actually. He certainly made Ferdinand VII look better than he was. But they were a damned unprepossessing bunch. And, of course, as dysfunctional a family as the Windsors, I mean, they were really something.
The present-day Windsors.
Yeah, as the present-day Windsors. I mean, what's her name, Maria Luisa, the wife of Carlos IV, and the mother of the Bourbon who came back after Napoleon took over Spain, said that her son looked like a toad.
Yeah.
And there wasn't much love lost between them. They were a very strange bunch, and they were very inept. And there was Goya negotiating his way between these people and producing these truly memorable icons of kingship and queenship.
Is he one of the great portrait painters?
He's one of the greatest portrait painters ever, without a question. In fact, if I was asked to, I mean, he owed something to English portraitists like Gainsborough and Reynolds and Romney and so forth, but he, yeah, absolutely, he's one of the greatest. He's one of the greatest topographers of the human face that ever existed. And he's both extremely faithful and incredibly inventive.
Yeah. What was it that Picasso once said that, you know, that a portraitist, that somebody who paints portraits is painting himself?
Yeah, that was before Picasso.
It's as much about the painter.
That's an old Roman saying.
It's as much about the painter as is the subject.
Yes, well, I think that's probably true to some degree, but not quite as much.
With Goya?
Not quite as much with Goya. Yeah. No, I mean, he was very interested in what other people looked like and very respectful of it. But at the same time, there's no question that he injects some of himself into the portraits. I mean, the classic case, I suppose, is the portraits of the Duchess of Alba.
Yeah.
I mean, people they like to think that he had an affair with the Duchess of Alba, because right here in New York, for instance, there's the portrait of Alba standing with a ring with her husband's picture on it and one inscribed Goya, and she's pointing downwards at an inscription traced in the sand. This is just after her husband's death, and the inscription reads, "Solo Goya, only Goya." Wow. But this is his fantasy, not hers, I think.
Yeah.
See, he was nuts about her. Not surprisingly, because she was reputed to be the greatest beauty in Spain. I mean, she looked like a sort of supercharged version of Cher.
All right, let me take a look at some of these visuals. The first one is a self-portrait in the studio. There he is.
There he is, as a MUCHO.
Yeah.
You know, in that costume which is still used by bullfighters.
Yeah.
He loved that costume because it signified masculinity, streetwiseness. You know.
Now, where is this? Do you know where this is?
Yeah, it's in the Academia de San Fernando in Madrid.
Yeah. The next one is Saint Isidro's Meadow.
San Isidro's Meadow.
Yeah.
San Isidro was the patron saint of Madrid.
Yeah.
And, you know, on the saint's feast day, all these people would come from all over Madrid, and they would dip water out of the holy well of San Isidro, which was reputed to have miraculous properties. It's an Impressionist painting a long time before Impressionism. There they are having a lovely time in the sunlight. You know, pretty girls, handsome men. Yeah, it's a fantastic picture.
Next one is the pilgrimage of San Isidro as well.
And that, you see, is 30 years later. And the difference between the two, on the one hand, that one we were just looking at, all those people happily cavorting in the sunlight and flirting and so forth, and this nightmare vision of, you know, these howling, stupefied faces, you know, pressed up against the picture, yelling like rhesus monkeys. I mean, it's a really scary vision of humanity en masse. Nothing is more untrue than the idea that Goya was some sort of an unthinking populist. He really was not. He didn't like humanity en masse very much, and that comes out in his...
Now, why was that?
Because he was a sensible man. He knew you couldn't love everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fantasy.
So it was his own realism.
Yeah, I mean, it was his own realism. I mean, all good human communication depends to some extent upon elitism.
Why did you choose this for the cover?
Because it's his most famous picture.
Yeah, okay, so
it's and I think in some respects his greatest one. It's the shooting of the insurgents of the 2nd of May on the 3rd of May.
Just because of your reputation as an art critic, tell me why that's a great painting.
Well, first of all, we're not looking at the whole painting.
No, of course not. You can tell that. Yeah.
But I think I can tell you why that's a great human figure. First of all, because it appeals on so many different levels. I mean, you see that little swarthy peasant throwing out his arms in that gesture as if he was throwing his own life into the muzzles of the firing squad.
Yeah.
There's this mass of absolutely faceless figures in their greatcoats, the French, who were about to mow him down. You don't see their faces. It brings up everything that you've ever known or suspected about the anonymity of modern warfare.
Right.
You know, with those backs braced into the recoil of those big 70 caliber muskets.
And the randomness of it.
And the randomness of it, and the fact that he wasn't tried, etc., etc. And it's such a, I think, moving tribute to the indomitable character of Spanish working class resistance to Napoleon.
Another great book that you are dying to write. I mean, you had this and you've lived with this idea. What is it?
A memoir.
Is it really?
Yes, I want to do that. The next book I write is going to be about an architect, Norman Foster.
Sure. Why are you doing that? I mean, I know Sir Lord Norman Foster.
Lord Foster,
yeah,
yes.
And he's, he's contemporary.
Yes.
He's writing, and he's working as we speak.
That's right.
He's even having some work here in the United States.
Or in the case of the World Trade Center, not having some work.
Or not having, he wasn't selected there. But why him, and why an architect? I mean, he's,
I studied architecture for 4 years at Sydney University. I've never written much about architecture.
Okay, but is there something about Norman Foster? I mean, you like his work particularly rather than Frank Gehry or I.M. Pei or a whole dozen of others?
I like his work a lot more than I.M. Pei, although I highly respect I.M. Pei. Gehry has biographers clambering all over him like ticks on a hound.
Right.
I just think it would be really interesting to write about somebody who practices an imaginative art at a very high level of professionalism and at the same time has interesting ideas about architecture.
Do you still fish?
I do, but I can't. I can't do heavy wading like I used to because of my leg.
So you can't do fly fishing and wading out?
I can sort of mince along the banks of the stream.
Yeah, but you'd also go out in a boat too.
Oh yes,
you can do that.
I can do that, but I can't go out on a boat in heavy weather and pump up tuna from great depths. All of that stuff I used to love doing. I hope I will someday get back to it, but at the moment I just can't. So
the competition with the damage done to your body from the automobile accident is an ongoing competition.
It's an ongoing competition. It's an ongoing sort of act of irritable rehabilitation.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that I will get it done. It's just that, when you're 65, as I am, it takes a little longer. I mean, if I was 25, it would be a different matter. If I was a young fellow like you.
Yes, of course. Yeah, but I mean, we've told the story of Robert Hughes, who used to live in the village and roar around town on his motorcycle.
On the Honda,
sort of the romantic figure that he was at that time.
I don't know that dramatic, but I certainly get a slight twinge of nostalgia when I look at those photos. I had such a beautiful black leather jacket.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
This book is Goya, told by Robert Hughes. Let's do some more stuff here soon.
Anytime, Capitan.
Great to see you.
And you.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Becomes an essential link to the modernity that was coming. Yeah, that was something.
That may be the answer in part to the next question that I want to ask you is, what is his significance and why is he important? Because you once said, as an art critic, if you don't understand or approach Goya, then you are illiterate.
Yeah,
as an art
I think
critic.
that's true. In the same way, if you're a literary critic and you can't deal or won't deal with one of the heroes of my life, I don't have sporting heroes, but I do have Goya, he just totally fascinated me, but I was never able to really find a way into him, because there isn't any diaries, there aren't any diaries, the letters exist, but they're fairly sparse, and yet nevertheless there was this feeling which I felt very strong. Now, we think sometimes that deafness is a bit comic. Hello, hello, Charlie? Not at all, no. It's more like that frightful utterance of one of Blake's mythic heroes where he says, lost are my emanations, meaning any form of self-expression. You're cut off. That's what happened to Goya, and to see him fighting his way through it to a new subject matter, to a subject matter which hadn't existed in painting really before, and which...
Robert Hughes is here. He was chief art critic for Time magazine until 2001. His books include American Visions, The Fatal Shore, and The Culture of Complaint. This new book is Goya. It examines the life and work of the Spanish artist. I am pleased to have Robert Hughes back at this table now or whenever he would like to come. Welcome.
God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you, my friend. I'm not sure when you first told me you wanted to write this book.
Years ago.
Yeah.
I'd had it on my mind for a long time. I mean, Goya is, without question, that he had a kind of, not exactly charismatic, but extremely strong character, which enabled him to negotiate all the things that were thrown in his way, principally, of course, his deafness, which, you know, we think of...
Came at what age?
46 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And he was just stricken down, crushed under it like a bug under a harrow, you know. Suddenly, he couldn't hear the rest of the world.